Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Vishnu Doerga, board member of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and this evening I would want to welcome you to the Georgetown Chamber's Security and Governance Committee webinar on risk management fundamentals for businesses. This evening, again, as is customary with the Chamber, we will be having several panelists, and I will be functioning in a double duty this evening as both your host and a panelist as well. And we are joined by Colonel Brian Chin of Magua Risk Consulting and Mr. Paul Archer of Loss Control and Risk Management Guyana. Those will be the panelists who will be joining me this evening, and we will be presenting to you on the topic of risk management. And I will encourage you to type your comments into the chat box so that we can bring you on screen if this is a new topic to you. I'm sure that you may have questions on your mind that you may want to be answered. If it's a topic that you're very familiar with, it could be something that you could reemphasize, or you may also want to share some knowledge. Please make sure that you drop it in the comments box so that we can allow for our panelists to discuss it further, and for everyone who is following us this evening to also, benefit from your knowledge as well. We're all here to share and learn and grow together, and this is the mandate of the specific of this specific committee, to make sure that you get education, you get the knowledge that is out there to benefit you in your business and in your organization. So without going any further, I'd now like to bring on screen Colonel Brian Chin from Magua. Brian, welcome.
Welcome,
you. Brian.
Thanks, Dr. Doerga, and good night, everyone. We had an interesting meeting with the Security Committee, the Security and Governance Committee for the Chamber a few months ago during the political crisis, and it became very obvious during that meeting that the topic of risk management and just approaching risk was a very important topic. And I thank the Chamber for creating the opportunity, and especially Dr. Doerga for creating this opportunity for us to discuss it today. I'm going to do the presentation, very, very broad overview in just a few minutes, and leave it to the second presenter, Mr. Paul Archer, to drill down into the details of risk management.
Thank you very much, Brian. So we now have your presentation on screen, and once you go into full screen, I would hand the meeting over to you to take our audience through the presentation. So all over to you, Brian.
Thank you. Okay, so the topic is risk management, and we're going to specify the term enterprise risk management because I think it's the most appropriate term for what's going on in Guyana. And I'm also going to talk just briefly on enterprise security risk management. But bottom line is, as the screen shows, ERM, enterprise risk management, is basically a methodology. In a nutshell, it's a systems approach to understanding your risk and what to do about it. And down at the bottom of the screen, enterprise security risk management is more narrowly scoped and focused on security risks, physical security risks. So comparing the two systems, in a traditional silos system, you would have individual departments focusing narrowly on their risks, like the audit committee just focusing on financial risk, or the legal department on regulatory compliance. And in doing so, they themselves run the risk of missing certain risks because they're not having a holistic approach, right? So they're missing all the different cross-functional risks, they're missing industry-wide risks, they're missing political risks. And if you think about how important political risk was in the last few months in Guyana, I had clients that called me, and the majority of their questions had to do with political risk. How do the decisions that political leaders make in Guyana impact their bottom line? How does it impact them if they're, as colloquial term, tie bundle with one government and then get thrown out, with the baby being thrown out of the bathwater with the other government. And of course, there's reputational or brands risk. So some of the trends pushing ERM, obviously, there are a lot of factors. There's a greater need for transparency in today's world. Insurance requirements are much higher. There's much more compliance and disclosure requirements. There are rating agencies that are rating different organizations. This globalization, the world is much more interconnected today. Security and technology makes it easy to look at things in a very holistic way and thus enables ERM. ERM gives us a greater ability to prepare for disasters. Back in 2003, I was serving in Colombia on a military team, and back then we had just started to develop a protocol where before we ran any mission, we had to do what we called at the time ORM, Operational Risk Management. And when we had to assess all the risks we face, and then we had to pass it on to our leadership before they blessed off on each and every mission. And at the time, I sometimes found it onerous at the beginning, but later on, I appreciated that for me as a leader, it caused me to have to see all the different risks I face and to think those through and to develop measures to mitigate them. So I really appreciate the methodology. And this is going way back to 2003. So what are some types of risks? And these are just a few, operational risk, strategic risk, financial risk, compliance. There's so many more that are not up there. Currency risk, if your business has a lot to do with a particular currency, and that currency could change. Looking at reputational risk, that's sometimes something we never think about too much. Back in the late 90s, I worked on a project where we provided risk management to a major basketball team in the US. And what we found is, and as you can imagine, once they played a game and the guys relaxed and went out to hit the bars at night, reputational risks all of a sudden shot up. And what the things those guys could do in a bar to just really ruin the reputation of the team. So things that you wouldn't normally think about, or you wouldn't have a department that is focused on. And again, that's why you need to look at things from an enterprise approach. So what are some key elements of having an enterprise risk management program? Well, it gives you a chance to identify all the risks from all different levels and perspectives. It gives you a chance to quantify the likelihood of the risk occurring, the potential, the impact of something happening, all the different interrelationships between the different types of risks. Very importantly, it allows you to define the risk appetite or tolerance for the organization, understanding that different parts of the organization and different levels could have different risk tolerances. That's a very important one that we don't think about at all. For instance, just a few months ago at the height of COVID, we're still there, I developed a COVID mitigation plan for a client that's a family-owned business. But then I had to realize that each family household had to tweak it to their particular situation because each household had a different appetite or tolerance to risk. So for instance, you would have a household where you had an elderly person. You'd have a household where you'd have children. And so you have a household where you have a lot of workers coming in and out. So it varied. So what I did was I developed a baseline, kind of not to go below this baseline, and I left it to each household to tweak it and make it stricter than what we developed. So some factors, speaking some more on risk appetite, some factors for determining in a business setting what is your risk appetite is what are the expectations of your shareholders. Obviously, in something like dynamic, like the oil fields in Guyana, shareholders expect that companies like Exxon will go out there and drill drill using some kind of measurement to mitigate the risk of coming up dry, but go out there and really be a wildcat and drill like crazy so to increase the possibility of finding oil, right? Obviously, stuff like the willingness to accept earnings volatility would be key to some companies. How the company can withstand a financial loss would determine its risk appetite, your credit rating, and usually the leadership of a company will determine and make public to the staff what risks are considered absolutely unacceptable. So likewise, in my mission in Colombia, we had a risk tolerance that no one getting hurt was worth the risk, because of the kind of mission we were doing. So I knew that I could easily make decisions. If I thought someone could get hurt, the likelihood was very likely that someone could get hurt. I could terminate the mission. I could change the plans to suit that criteria, because I was specifically told no one should get hurt. And in the case of Colombia in 2003, no one should become captive. So some of the benefits of an enterprise risk management program is, well, it allows all the different parts of the enterprise to understand and work within the risk appetite, and for that risk appetite to be incorporated into the company's corporate strategy. It is linked to the financial performance. It links to having a program allows you to improve the way you respond. It reduces surprises and losses. It helps you manage the risk in a holistic manner. It recognizes and acts upon opportunities. And I want to say that when we deal with risk, we're not always dealing with bad events. We're also looking at good events, because a risk could be not anticipating a good event happening, not anticipating that, a currency would fall and cause your profits to increase, so you didn't prep for it. So risk is not just about bad stuff happening. It's also anticipating and knowing good stuff happening. And of course, by having a methodology where you assess your risks ahead of time, you're able to deploy your resources effectively. So at a strategic level, some of the needs you would have for a good ERM program is you must have ownership buy-in, the famous C-suite. They must be on board. There's no sense of the chief security officer and the guys with the risk and compliance responsibilities are talking about it, and the owners don't buy in, right? But what the ERM program does, it allows you to go to that ownership with a problem spelled out. Sir, this is the risk. This is what could happen. This is the likelihood of it happening. This is the cost to mitigate the risk. These are some mitigation measures, and these are the resources that we recommend that you do to mitigate that risk. Likewise, it allows you to have a risk management program by understanding what bad things or good things could happen. It allows you to have a plan to manage that ahead of time, and especially those acute times when things happen in a crisis, when you go into crisis management mode. Paul Archer, the person who's going to speak behind me, is a professional in the security industry, and he knows very well how having a sophisticated insurance coverage is a big part of being prepared, a company being prepared to deal with risks. So real quick, switching to what's the small difference between ERM and ESRM, Enterprise Security Risk Management. And all ESRM is that it is focused singularly, but of course within the bigger picture of using risk principles to define and address physical security risks. So be it, how many guard posts, access control, investigating losses within the company, investigating cyber attacks, preventing cyber attacks. They're narrowly focused on the physical things. And of course, that department is usually led by a security officer. And his role is usually slightly different from an ERM practitioner. So for instance, one of my clients today in Guyana is a bank, and that bank has a risk management professional. But that risk management professional tends to be more focused on like the risk in making bank loans and making bad loans and so on, while the security practitioner is focused obviously on stuff like bank robberies and preventing bank robberies, right? So the two roles complement each other, and you need both to manage the assets, the people, and all the different risks. Some of the ESRM functions. One of the great things about ESRM is that it changes that equation from just doing certain tasks to defining who is it that does the task, and laying it out in a practical way. You know, what is the asset we're trying to protect? What's the risk associated for that asset? Who in this department, who in this organization is responsible for that risk? How should we mitigate the risk, and how should we respond if the risk becomes a reality? One of the things we always have to do is we always have to make sure the measures are commensurate with the measures, the risk we're trying to mitigate. A while ago in the 1990s, right here in Guyana, when I ran a security company, I had a friend and colleague, and he owned a warehouse that stored chicken feed. And one day someone broke in the warehouse and stole a bag of feed. And he came to me and he was very upset. He felt violated. And he wanted me to put an alarm system, a very elaborate alarm system, into the warehouse. I actually talked him out of it, because when I looked at what was lost and the history of losses of that warehouse and what could be lost, I realized that he was spending $500 to protect $50, and it didn't make any sense. Fast forward to today, I had another client not that long ago, and someone jumped the fence and stole some paint cans and paint. Again, that client came to me, and he wanted to put up laser beams at the top of his fence to protect against someone climbing the fence. But once I assessed the risk, and I realized that, you know, that fence was a boundary that, you know, just the amount of false alarms you would generate, how easy it would be to circumvent the lasers, and then, of course, what you're trying to protect, it didn't make any sense to invest in an elaborate system. So you know, having an ESRM program allows you to narrowly focus on what's really important. You know, many people go into a U.S. military base, wonder how come there's not a lot of guards at the gate? How come there's not a big fence around the entire facility? Well, those bases are huge, and they may not always have a big fence, but you can imagine that where the ammunition is stored, boy, that's guarded. Where the communication center is, that's really guarded. So in other words, you bring it in and you discuss, you know, what's the impact, where the high impact places that can be attacked, and you protect those. With no further ado, I'd like to end there, and I'd like to say that thank you for listening. I tried to keep it very broad and just give an introduction to risk management, and I'd like to turn the floor back over to Dr. Doerga. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian, for that really great interview, that great overview. And what I would ask is that you be on standby as well in the studio, as Paul and myself also deliver. And I would encourage persons out there as well who are viewing these presentations to send in any questions, any comments, any other advice that you may have when it comes to risk management. So thank you very much, Brian, and we'll see you back in a short while. Let me now introduce Mr. Paul Archer, who is from Loss Control and Risk Management Guyana. So Paul is going to be also presenting on the topic of risk management. Paul, good evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
Right, so I'll bring up your slide now, and I now pass on control to you to get started with your presentation.
Okay, you're here. Okay. So good evening, all, and thank you for having me. So what I'll be doing is giving a brief outline on risk management process and focus on the various forms of risk treatments there have out there that risk managers use. At the end, you should have a clear understanding or better understanding of the way risk management as a process and have a positive effect on any type of business operation. So let's go into our first slide here. So risk. So risk, as we know it's not a, we look at, as that Brian was saying, we have to look at risk as a positive, a positive and negative. What risk managers do now, we don't look at the doom and gloom. So risk is defined as the effect of uncertainty on objectives. The effect is what is the effect is a deviation from the expected and can be either positive or negative. If we look at a couple of industries you guys may be acquainted with, let's say a road building contractor or a home builder. So the positive effect of weather on them would be excellent weather. So if they're bad weather conditions, that'd be negative. You have restaurants, so their risk is fire. Positive would be no fires. Negative would be a fire. And other industries is the same thing. You have garment manufacturing, and also any type of food processing. The machinery there would be affected. So I'm missing up my slides here. Risk management. So the risk management, per se, what risk management is, it's going a little deeper into what Brian was explaining on the enterprise risk management. Risk management is to be a framework within the enterprise risk management strategic objectives. It's coordinated activities to direct and control an organization with regard to risk. Managing these activities would help to control the many potential risks and events that may affect an organization. So you can have objectives that have various aspects. You have financial, you have health and safety, among others, and can apply at different levels of the organization. You can have strategic, have organization-wide, as on a project, for instance, or in a process. In essence, a risk management plan can be applied to a particular product, process, or in a project. The risk treatments. Okay, so we're going to risk treatment. Basic steps in the risk management process are risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation, risk treatment, and risk monitoring. Following the risk assessment process, which is the identification, analysis, and evaluation of risks, risks are ranked and the risk treatment options applied as necessary. So the risk treatment, what a risk treatment is, the process to modify risks. That's what risk treatment is. To avoid, when you do your assessment of the risk, you may decide, okay, we're going to avoid a risk. So avoiding the risk is deciding not to start or continue with the activity that gives rise to the risk. I had said earlier, part of the risk management process is monitoring. So you may have an ongoing process, and based on your returns from that process, you say, okay, we're not going to continue with this risk. Or when you analyze a new project, you may say, okay, we're not going to start it. Like a road contractor could say, okay, we're not going to work in the weather based on what equipment they have, right? A garment factory may say, we're not going to use any particular type of machinery, that this model of machinery will not suit what we're doing, or use one machine instead of using two, right? You're looking to upgrade yourself, so you have to do the risk management analysis and the cost benefit to see what you get. So another form of managing risk treatment would be risk reduction. So risk reduction changes the likelihood or consequence of a risk. It's the same as frequency. Frequency is how often the same event will occur, and severity is the financial impact following the event. So if we could get it a little more clear, if we look at, let's say, a retail operation, maybe a store. So you have your risk of break-ins. So on the security side, if you follow the recommendations to secure your premises, that will assist you to reduce the risk. And then like food in a food or restaurant operation, the fire is the risk. So proper housekeeping, fire prevention procedures like no smoking, you have proper housekeeping, not much garbage around in the kitchen, and proper storage of flammables would reduce the risk, the severity, and the frequency of a risk. Now, another thing on the severity, when you look at the severity of risk, what the risk managers do also is look at what they call the velocity, as how fast something will happen. So if you have, let's say, a flood, so you're doing, maybe you have a rice mill which is close to the ocean or close to a river, right, where it's flood prone. We say, okay, we want to get an assessment of flood. You know how much losses, the total losses could be. But then you look at the mitigate. So this, so the velocity of the maximum loss is what you look at, and then along the way, then you see how you could mitigate. So which helps, right? But it has to be, it's part of the process that we would do to assist. A common form of risk transfer, as we all know, is through insurance contracts. So this is where the insurance carrier assumes your risk in exchange for a premium. So you want to insure your building. Say my building is worth so many million. Insurance company says, pay us this premium, and we will protect we cover your property. So if there's any loss by fire or whatever insurable risk they cover you, then they pay. Now, in the modern climate, now we have also harmless agreements. Why I put this in here is for persons who are contractors. The whole harmless agreement basically is a provision in a contract that requires one contracting party to respond to certain legal liabilities of the other party. So let's say this is mostly in construction contracts. So it requires the contractor to indemnify the owner with respect to the owner's liability to members of the public who are injured or whose property is damaged during the course of the contractor's operations. What this practical example would be, let's say you have a road, the road contractor on Mandela Avenue. So they're working there. They should have a whole harmless agreement for the government who would be the owner. So what that does is if they damage any property while they're working or anyone gets injured from their negligence, their insurance pays. You can't go against the owner, which would be the government or the employer. You find this a lot with the subcontractors, those who are working doing work for the oil companies. They put this in the contract to protect themselves. So for contractors and the persons who doing work with the oil and gas industry need to look at these contracts very closely. You consult with your lawyer, with your insurance company, get the brokers involved when you get a contract. And owners, business owners, also who get into contracts with contractors need to protect themselves and maybe consult with your insurance company or your brokers to see how best they could assist you in getting a whole harmless agreements in there, so you're not on the hook for negligence of the contractor you're employing. Risk sharing is another form of risk transfer. So this is like group health, group medical plans. The staff pays the premium, the employers pay a premium, also pay part of the premium, so you're sharing the risk. Insurance contracts are the same with your deductibles. You have a deductible under your policy, so you share part of the risk of your property getting damaged with the insurance company. Acceptance, risk acceptance. Now, Acceptance is not ignoring a particular risk. As part of the risk management process, acceptable risks need to be monitored. So it's if you decide that you're gonna go ahead with a project or with a process in your factory, you may say, okay, we're gonna go with this machine, but you need to monitor it, even though you accept it, you still need to monitor it for whatever reason, right? So it could be against fire damage, so you have to have fire extinguishers in place. It may be like sudden. You need the. I saw some place in Guyana. They have. I was there, and they had the escalator with, and I noticed it didn't have a emergency stop. Right? I mean that's very dangerous. Right? So stuff like that is need to be aware of. So I think I did as much in the short time I had. So thank you very much. Let's go to some questions. Hopefully I can.
So thank you very much, Paul. And we have your contact information up there as well. And for both yourself and Brian, persons would be able to also see the recordings, view the recordings here, and be able to make contact for you for your expertise. We are receiving various questions and comments. I'm going to encourage people to continue sending those in so we can deal with them during the discussion. So Paul, I'm going to ask you to just be with us for a little moment. I'm going to present and kind of wrap up what we've been speaking about, and then we'll go into a panel format and take the questions. But thank you very much for the presentation.
You're welcome.
All right, and to wrap things up this evening, I'll be talking about very specifically the types of business risks that exist in Guyana and across the world, because I do know that Guyana is really getting a lot of attention from places all across the world, and we are delivering what we can at the moment, and we should also not sell ourselves short. We are moving at a decent pace. But the key thing with the business risk, it is anything that could lower the profit, especially if we think about what Paul mentioned, negative risk. Negative risk are really threats. It can cause a company to actually lose profits or actually go bankrupt if these risks aren't properly managed. On the positive side, positive risks also exist. Those are called opportunities, because something that might be a risk for you that might end up being negative could actually be positive for a competitor. So it's something to always give some thought to. Now, the 5 main types of business risks that you could possibly face, and I'm very happy that Brian and Paul have gone through the details with that, are strategic risks. These are the type of strategic decisions that the management, the executives of the organizations are making as they are deciding how to develop the company. But a wrong move as well, targeting the wrong market or going after products or services that are not really ready yet for the market or may not be able to get to the right volume. Those are strategic risks that a company can take. Reputational risk, anything that you can do, one of your managers, one of your executives ending up in a situation, a compromising situation, that could cause reputational risks to the organization. Imagine if they're there with their uniform caught in a negative situation. It can have some spillover effects to the company. Is this something that your company has actually considered, decided what to do? Operational risk. This can actually happen, especially when it comes to your internal processes not being documented or not being followed as well. And it could be done either internally, your own people aren't doing it, or you could have external events that are affecting the company. And on this note, I did want to also make the suggestion that any company that's already mid-size heading into a large company, if you haven't considered ISO compliance or ISO certification, it is something that takes into consideration as well risk management, especially clauses 5, 6, and 9 actually deal with the risks that your organization may face and what actions you can take and what preventative measures you can put in place as well. So even in our own company's journey towards ISO certification, that was the type of exercise that allowed us to personally see the types of risks that we could be facing, the types of threats that we could be facing. And it allows you to have documented systems in place that actually allow you to mitigate those risks. Now, transactional risks are sometimes the things that we don't think about. We do a large sale, we export a large amount of goods overseas. A transactional risk is the additional cost. Yes, we said that we're selling the item for X dollars, but did we consider that the bank is going to take their charge off of it? There may be some other currency losses as well. You might have calculated to receive your money at 215, but when the US dollars come into the country, they actually get converted at 205. That is a transactional risk that you could also be facing. And if you don't consider this ahead of time, you could end up in a situation that you're losing money because of that specific type of risk. Next, we have compliance risk. And these are risks related to the violations of laws, rules, and regulations, or non-compliance. And one of the ones that comes to my mind very quickly is when companies, especially if they're small to medium, and they're not complying with GRA regulations or NIS regulations. And some companies take those profits and they keep reinvesting it into the company. And what can happen when you finally now understand, or when it's made clear to you that you're supposed to be making these deductions, not only may you be faced with fines, but you could also end up in a situation that the money, the liquidity is not there to actually pay these liabilities that you may now have with the revenue authority, with the insurance authority. It could be with the Environmental Protection Agency. Maybe you're dumping your waste in a manner that is really affecting the environment or your neighbors negatively. And you may have been doing it for a month and for a year and even for 10 years. But what if you suddenly have someone in your neighborhood, or the EPA comes around and now applies the compliance to the regulations to you? How will you be able to continue if you in the past did not really deal with those kind of risks? So I think overall the case has been made that risk management is something that we need to do. And in the morning when you are about to leave home, just looking outside and looking at if there's sunshine or not, for you to decide if you're going to walk with an umbrella, that's a little bit of risk management. So it's not that we do not understand what risk management is all about, but are we applying it to our businesses? Are we thinking about the things that could go wrong, could go right, and are we setting ourselves up in a way that we can actually benefit from this? So why manage risk? I think it's made very clear. You can save, you can save your people, you can save lives if you think about it. We still pass by many construction sites and we see people without harnesses, without hard hats, without personal protective equipment. And maybe we did not consider it, but what if a falling object hits one of these persons and they don't have a hard hat? You actually taking into consideration the risks that people face could save their lives. You could save money, property, and more importantly, your time as well. You can really protect your image, and it could also be used as marketing. When a company really takes care of its risk, it means it takes care of its customers, right? And of course, reducing legal liabilities. Nobody wants to get caught up in the court system trying to fight risks that have caused difficulties for either the company or your customers or your suppliers. And how do you pull all of this together? Whenever we talk about risk management, we always look at two parameters. We look at the probability, the likelihood that this risk may happen. And it could generally be either low, medium, or high. So low likelihood is very, very unlikely to happen. High likelihood, very likely that it may happen. And then we look at the impact. If this risk were to occur, will it have a low impact on the organization? And I think both Brian and Paul mentioned, does it really make sense putting up laser beams that you can cut people in half for a tin of paint, right? Would you make that $1 million investment to save 5,000, right? So it may be a very low impact, but there could also be things that are high impact. that you may not have considered, being in a flood-prone area. And if you have flooding, your stocks may be damaged, your customers can't get to you. And by placing the various risks that your organization can face into the right quadrant, you can actually start understanding. And if you need to take a screenshot, please take a screenshot of the screen. You can start looking at what are acceptable risks. All the areas in green, those are the type of things that we can say, okay, we can accept, but in some cases we need to monitor these risks. In some cases we need to manage them. When it's likely that this thing will happen, but it will have a low impact, that's a situation where we need to manage. What we have to be very careful of is that we're not in an industry, or that we don't face a large number of risks that are both highly likely to happen and have a high impact. Because if you are in a scenario like that, where you have more than 2, 3, 4 of those type of risks, it could be a very dangerous situation for your organization. So what I would like to ask you is make sure that you get the right advice. I'm seeing good comments coming in as well. People are advising each other on the comments in the chamber, on the chamber page. That is fantastic. But there is no substitute for technical expertise, for risk management expertise. The persons who are skilled in this have spent years and years and years of understanding all the various risks that are that could possibly affect your individuals and your organization. So with that, in case you do want to get onto our company, I think the best way, you have some of the contact information there, but go to our website and you will notice as well that our website is now laid out in a way that it speaks to the business owners, the executives, employees, government, and NGOs, and you'll be able to find what you are looking for. So with that, I would like to thank you for paying keen attention to my presentation. I'll now bring both Brian and Paul back on screen. And whilst I get the questions going, I'm just going to ask both Paul and Brian. I can see that you're muted. Let me try to unmute both of you.
Yeah.
And I'll start bringing up some of the questions. So we have Mr. Sean Kirkpatrick, I think from PGS, is asking us here, what would you consider to be an acceptable level of risk? So let's, Brian, if you can get started with you, what would be your comment to that?
Yes, I mentioned that just in general, the risk, the measure of carrying a high-powered firearm does not seem to match the risk, the likelihood of there being a gang attacking one of those stores with high-powered weapons. I don't see that there's anything in those stores, a typical retail store on Regent Street, that kind of gang would attack, not even the money. That's my opinion. And the second thing is that carrying those high-powered firearms, the guards, creates a greater risk that bystanders would be hurt. So I don't think it's a good risk mitigation measure, especially in the absence of a specific threat against stores.
Very good, very good. Paul, your answer to what is considered an acceptable level of risk. I do think Brian is actually looking ahead a little bit and he's seeing all the questions and answers coming about. But what would you say?
Well, how you arrive at the acceptable level of risk? You have to go through the risk management process. So you go through that and you get all your questions answered on the environment, the volume of people, like Brian say, you know what the stores have, what is the potential of loss, and then you arrive at what is accepted, with the risk tolerance there, and so that's I think elaborate what Brian is saying. But you have to go through it. You have to go through all the questions to see how to arrive at acceptable level of risk. It's not just something you get by guessing.
Very good.
Yeah, and the quality, it also, the persons who you're dealing with within the organization. Because each company has different people, and in the company, one person is the same as the other.
Very good. And also I can see that we have Mr. Clarence Garraway weighing in as well. He is saying he's no expert, but he would imagine that it depends on many factors, the things that you're trying to protect, the likelihood of the risk materializing, and the effects of the risk and the risk tolerance of the entity in question. So those are some key factors that will also allow someone to determine what is the level of risk that is can possibly be addressed. And this one here, in reference to security, are you concerned about heavy firepower, firearms used on Regent Street and in crowded areas? Brian, you did touch a little bit on that one. And we actually have Miss Anamika Smith saying, she is concerned because the firepower doesn't seem to match the likely risk, and the firepower creates risk to bystanders. The only comment I would like to make on that is I actually do remember the years back in the early 2000s when there were armed gangs actually attacking stores on Regent Street. So many of these stores are still very conscious of that being not a risk that has never happened. It has actually happened in the past. And again, by the measures that they are taking, they may actually think that they're reducing the risk, but what we're seeing here, what we're hearing from Ms. Smith and from Brian, is that they may actually be making it worse. So Brian, can you shed a little bit more light on that?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I was answering, first of all, I'm the person that typed for Anamika Smith to give that answer. But from her account, because I'm sharing it because I don't have a Facebook account currently. I actually like Paul's answer. I think Paul's answer was appropriate because Paul said, rather than just answer the question, he said you have to go through a process. And clearly I answered based on a very rapid assessment on the process, and he answered in a way that is a more structured assessment. Just a year and a half ago, I was doing some risk management at the United Nations here in Guyana, and they required armed people to follow their cars to the airport during the night. But once that, because at one time that was a big threat in Guyana, but that hasn't happened in such a long time that they took the decision, because of the lack of recent occurrences, to throttle back on that. I'm saying this in this forum because this is a very private forum, of course. But that's an example that, you're right that legacy incidents can affect your judgment today. But again, sometimes it's a business decision. Can you afford to do it? Is the risk justified? I don't think today that on Regent Street at this moment that there's a risk of the intruders having high-powered weapons. So you don't need. I'm not saying your guards shouldn't have weapons. They probably don't need the high-powered weapons. So.
Thank you very much for that. And I can actually see it coming up for Paul here.
Yeah, but that Brian, yeah, that's excellent. But that's following up on that is where the risk management process comes in, because you're talking about monitoring. Something happened there in the mid 2000s. I mean, I was there. I know, but it was horrible. But that is not happening now. So you have to, when you put those measures in place right there and then. So now is when you monitor the risk again, and so the risk management process is a loop. So you're looping all the time. So you keep monitoring it, and you have to keep monitoring it to adjust. And then you keep making money when you do that in your business. Okay.
Very good. We have Ms. Shauna Ramdihan is asking. She's wondering how risk management can be applied to a service-oriented business. Paul mentioned that risk management can be applied to a process. So her question is, can you use a simple scenario? For example, let's use a cleaning business to describe two major risks that this type of business should consider and how to go about managing such risk. Paul?
Well, you have what you call, well, I don't want to get complicated, but if you, in a cleaning business, you would get a risk register. It's the other risks they're exposed to. So it's labor intensive. So you have workers who could be injured, and you have machinery. Depends on the level of your cleaning business. So you have heavy machinery. So then you have risk of injuries to employees from lifting that machinery, and the machinery has to be insured also. So now you have to have liability insurance, because when you go into someone's premises, if you cause any injury or damage to that premises, you're responsible. So let's say you take your whatever you do for cleaning, it's electrical stuff, and maybe you are using heating, and then something bursts and burns someone's child, then you're responsible. You have to have insurance for that. So you have to protect yourself and your equipment. So it's insurance for that. And to mitigate, you have to mitigate also. You may not need insurance and everything.
Very good, very good. And I can also see that we have Mr. Dallas Thomas is also weighing in. And he was saying, for example, that cleaning company, let's say someone slips, trips, or falls if the proper signage is not used. How do you set up your cleaning site? If you're plugging in a piece of equipment that needs to be plugged in, make sure that the proper voltage is there not to damage the equipment or the venue. So, these are some of the things that are very practical that sometimes we don't think about until, and we're not in a very litigious society as yet. But I've been to Trinidad. In the US, it's very common where people are looking for hazards that are prevalent in businesses just to get caught by the hazard in order to be able to benefit from the company. So if we don't take care of minimizing and mitigating those risks, we can end up in a situation when people actually do look at, maybe these companies need to be held liable for that. So we need to be proactive about this.
Yeah, you're perfectly correct. It's in the Guyana situation today. You have to look at what you would term emerging risks. So, and because of globalization, a lot of people traveling. Now you have a lot of foreigners in Guyana, and then you have the Guyanese who live overseas go back, and they expect certain things. Now everything is not what they're used to, but liability, it's a big thing, and there's heavy liability exposure there that people need to be aware of to protect themselves, because your business could be at risk.
Very good, very good. And we will take a few more questions. So anyone who still has questions on your mind, please make sure that you put them into the comments box very soon, because we are scheduled to be on for just about an hour. We may ask Brian and Paul to give us a couple of minutes over 8 o'clock, just to make sure that we answer some of these questions. Brian, we have a question here from Gallantry David. What would be an acceptable level of risk in the area of close protection?
I think that's a great risk tolerance question, in a sense that, and the answer would be, since close protection deals with protecting your person, the risk tolerance would be extremely high, because obviously you don't want to get hurt, you don't want anybody to get killed. So in that business, risk tolerances tend to be very extreme. I hope I answered that.
Very good, very good.
But Brian, going back there to the close protection, but me and Brian had a discussion, I think a few months ago, and I was saying, well, what do you think of the kidnap and ransom, right? In my view, I think that is the saying that we have in the risk management community is the bad people follow the money. Now Guyana is in 3 years, and business people would know where Guyana is going. So it's going very well. It's going quickly. So kidnap exposure is there. It's not happening, but now is the time for people to look at it, because it costs you less now to protect yourself against kidnap and ransom by insurance. And Brian would know the way that is done also without insurance. But people need to be aware of that,
Well, that might be a subject for a completely separate webinar, security and how we need to prepare ourselves for the new level of crime that will hit Guyana, because we talk about the positives, all the income and all the development that's going to happen in Guyana. But as you just mentioned, the criminals will also follow the money. So how do we protect for that?
And it's happening already,
So Annabelle is asking, and maybe we can get you on this, Paul. How can a small business determine its risk? And she's asking, would a SWOT analysis work?
Oh yes, yeah. But yeah, a SWOT analysis, yeah. For a small business, a SWOT analysis would work, but not on the whole package. right? But you use the SWOT analysis, yes, but you get some professionals to help you with that, and also you have the gap analysis also, which would help.
Very good. And then we have Mr. Raj Singh is asking, have the businesses in Guyana been making use of the risk management experts in the assessment and treatment of risk in their various businesses? Also, who are the experts out there that they can call upon? And maybe I can answer a little bit of this. You're looking at least two of the experts in our country who are really looking at risk management. My own company, we do it really more from a business and economic perspective. But when it comes to security and a wider range, we do have two of the experts here on the call this evening. So Brian, can you take that one for me and dissect it a little bit?
I think forums like this, thanks to you, Dr. Doerga, are helping to educate people that this is a process that you use to apply. It is a method of assessing your risk. And I think this kind of forum is raising the awareness so that people are aware of it.
Very good, very good. And maybe very soon, some countries actually have a risk management professional association, or they have some groupings. At the moment, the chamber, this is covered under the chamber's Security and Governance Committee. So if anyone is interested in being part of a business committee that is focused on security and governance, the chamber is definitely a place where you can find a home, where you can find a place where these things are discussed. And webinars like this are just one step in the process of getting this information out there. Paul, any thoughts on this question?
Well, I have done not much, but some work with companies there, on the consultancy level, right? And the response is good, but it's just something new. And so this, from the small companies to the large companies, we could help them, right? They just need to contact me, and then we work out the details. And if it's anything to do with insurance, if they have their own insurance broker, well, we advise them and look at the insurance program and say, okay, this speak to your broker on this, or I could speak to the broker also on your behalf, because I know all of them. And the stuff that is not insurable, well, then we help them with that, because that is a big thing. To help them
from a business
management program, definitely gives your business bottom line, it's better.
Yeah, I was just going to say, from a business risk perspective, our firm has been operating now for 6 years. And what we found in the beginning, only the very proactive companies, came about, the companies that were already doing well and were seeking to go to the next level. The vast majority of businesses in Guyana seem to be, and some of them still seem to be, very happy to chug along and go along the rate that it has been going. But in the past 2 to 3 years, I would say maybe 2 years more so, with the advent of more and more international companies coming into Guyana, regional companies coming into Guyana, and starting to stake their claim now for their market share, has woken up a lot of businesses, because now you're not competing against someone down the road. You're competing against a company that has left their own country, and not left their own country. They're doing pretty well in their country, and they've decided now to come here with a complete budget, with everything that is necessary to run a full-fledged business. And there's going to go down different routes. You either collaborate, you may sell out, or you may actually have to start running the business with all the modern management methods, with every single tool that you can possibly put your hands on, to really be competitive and to serve your clients well. Because if somebody else can serve your clients better than you can, how long do you think it will be before they switch to your competition? So it's something that we really need to take a look at. I know that Sean is mentioning here, what can be done to the minibuses misusing the roads? Because if we think about all our lives right now, and hopefully there's some minibus drivers looking at this as well, a significant risk of living in Guyana is putting our feet or putting our cars on the roadways. Any thoughts on this, Brian?
For the international companies and the organizations that work in Guyana, they all assess, and I agree, and I preach this, that the road risk is the highest risk that expats physically face in Guyana, and I think that applies to locals also. Just being in a car, walking on the road, just crossing the road is the number one way you can get hurt in Guyana. And obviously, you know, there needs to be a road safety council. There is one that addresses that issue, and organizations like the GCCI and the American Chamber of Commerce need to devote some time and resources to helping those organizations to address the issue. There's no one-stop answer for that.
Very good, very good. And maybe, Paul, I can come to you on this one here. Risk. This is coming from Wazim Khan. Risk assessment should be a repetitive process. How often, in your opinion, should a business do a risk assessment?
Well, the risk is the entire risk management process. There is a repetitive one. Now, it depends on the level and the size of the organization. If you look at the huge organization, let's look like the soft drink liquor companies there. So they have the board of directors. So that is where the strategic plans come from. So those your risk management plan goes directly written off, as Brian was saying. The enterprise risk management plan would go there. So those guys have to sign off on it, and then it comes down the line to the risk owners. Now the mid-size and the small businesses also, the owners have to be. So the risk you do, there's an annual review, and then based on particular specific risk that you see needs more review, then you do it, you know, monthly, quarterly, it depends. You know, if you're a taxi service and you're going to be cars, you know, you're changing cars or drivers, but then you have to do a, you know, more frequent assessment, maybe monthly basis, sometimes weekly. But the particular risk is that the exposure, that's the one you deal with. Right? And the entire thing, well, then you know the entire thing you have an annual review.
Very good. And you did mention that it depends on a lot on the type of business and the amount of risk that the business faces. You know, we are in a service-based business. In our case, we do it annually. It almost follows our strategic planning portion as well, where we actually deal with risk management. But then on a quarterly basis, we do a review. But this could be different for different companies, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
What I would like to do, and you know, we are past the 8 o'clock mark, I would ask for both, we'll get started with Brian and then we'll go over to Paul, but to really get your closing thoughts on the subject of risk management, and any final advice that you may have for anyone viewing this particular program, either live or a recording of this program in the future. So Brian, your closing thoughts?
I think like that sports ad that says just do it, I think it's something that you can't avoid. It's the right thing to do. It's the right time to do it. I think the world is a far riskier place, but we're also developing great methodologies to address our risks. So I would encourage everyone to either get smarter, use the compliance process, like services like Dr. Doerga offers to get on board with compliance and accreditation. And don't hesitate to reach out to risk management professionals. We're here to listen to your problems and give you responses. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much, Brian. And Paul, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, well, continue. Brian is saying, yes, that's what needs to be done. The companies, and especially the companies who are trying to get into the oil and gas market also, they need to have their self fully compliant. You know what you may know, they should be compliant before they get into these joint ventures, have everything in place so they make themselves attractive to investors. And the ones who are operating locally, also the small contractors, small businesses, they need to get themselves. It's what the risk management process done. It gets all employees risk conscious, and it permeates into society. So if you go into a store and you see you see everything it's well laid out in the store. You see fire extinguishers around, and you see the workers, coming, paying attention to you. That's well managed, and that comes from a proper risk management program. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Paul. And let me, on behalf of the Chamber as well, I know that you both serve, and particularly Brian, not just at the Georgetown Chamber, but the other organization, the other private sector organizations as well, really putting your shoulders to the wheel to make sure that people understand what type of knowledge is out there, what type of services are out there, how they can benefit from this. It really depends on individuals, organizations to take that next step to explore these services and to understand how they can really benefit, from what is happening in our economy, the way we're developing, and all these type of companies that are going to be coming here and that need all these various services. So there is a lot to be done. I can see that persons who have been viewing the presentation really appreciate the knowledge that you have brought this evening. And I would encourage you to continue, giving of your best to our economy, to Guyana. I will ensure that the Chamber puts the contact information of both your companies in the recording, so that any person who is very interested in taking it a step further can easily get onto you. So for everyone who's been viewing this evening, we thank you for your attention, and we encourage you to share this presentation. It will be recorded on Facebook. It will be on the YouTube channel. Share it with anyone else who really needs to have a better understanding of risk management and the benefits that it could provide to all our organizations. So thank you very much, and have a fantastic evening